Matt is over at Race RX, and we've teamed up with him over the next year. And we've really come to the understanding that we have a very similar philosophy in player and people development. And Matt's philosophy at Race RX goes back to working with professionals from the Phoenix Suns to the San Francisco Giants pitching staff. He's also worked with Rhea and the Brazilian national soccer program. And lastly, he just got done doing the Vietnam Soccer Academy fitness program. So without further ado, Dr. Ray.
Well, that was way too enthusiastic. The workout wasn't really hard enough. It's really cool for me to be here for a couple of reasons. First, any opportunity I think that we have to influence the minds of some young aspiring athletes, I'm grateful for that, for an opportunity to perhaps share a few thoughts that might help over the next year. And as Jeff mentioned, I'd like to talk for a second about what your athletes get to look forward to in the coming year. As Jeff mentioned, I had the good fortune of being able to work with over 1,000 professional athletes over the last 10 years. The misfortune of working with a few of them as well. And I get asked a lot from parents, well, how do I turn my kid into an elite athlete? Or how do I help my kid go pro? And generally I say, well, if you're searching for the magic pill, stop looking, because it doesn't happen that way. But I have noticed in my interactions with those athletes that there are a few characteristics that most of them share in common. So kids, I want you to think about 3 of those, because I want you to analyze yourself here for just a minute. Parents, no judgmentalness here for the next 30 minutes as they think about it. I'm not going to talk for 30 minutes, but they'll be thinking about it for 30 minutes. But kids, I want you to think about where you stand in these 3 areas. Elite athletes are generally elite athletes because they're very good. And that seems pretty self-explanatory, right? They're better than other athletes, and so they're elite. They're not elite athletes because their mom or dad was their coach, or because their older brother or sister are good. They're elite because they develop skills that other athletes did not develop. One of the favorite questions I have for elite athletes when I work with them is, at the age of 10 to 14, were you the star athlete in your community? 90% of them say no. They were not the star athlete when they were 12, 10, 8, 14. There was generally other kids that were better than them at that time. Now, some of them do say that they were, but an interesting thing happens when certain kids grow faster than others, or they're bigger than others, they mature a little bit faster, and they're the star athletes from the age of 10 to 14. But interestingly, other kids grow too. They just might grow at a different pace. And by the time 15, 16 years of age rolls around, everybody's about the same size. Most of the time, they're about running at about the same speed. But something has happened from the ages of 8 to 10 to 12 that causes some of these elite athletes to pass those kids that were much better than them at an earlier age. They had to work harder. So the number 2 thing that I see in elite athletes is that they work hard. But not only do they work hard, they actually love to practice. So there's one that I want you kids to think about. Do you love going to practice? Elite athletes actually love practice as much as they love to play. And I've noticed that recreational athletes, they love to play. They love games. They want to scrimmage nonstop. They love to play. And there's nothing wrong with that. But elite athletes, they love to practice because they love to get better, and they understand that the better they get, the funner a game gets because they dominate you. And if you ask any kid in here, I bet you they'll tell you that winning is a lot more enjoyable than losing. That doesn't happen by accident. They practice and practice and practice. Let me tell you a quick story. A few years ago when I started working with the San Francisco Giants, after 4 hours of spring training practice, I went out to work with one of the minor league players on one of the external fields. And out on that field was a third baseman named Matt Williams. And he was taking ground ball after ground ball after ground ball at third base. I know this is baseball, but you guys can still learn from this lesson. Right? 2 hours later, when I finally finished working with the guy that I was working with, Matt Williams was still there taking ground balls at third base. Now, that's not that uncommon. There were 3 or 4 other players out on that field with him. What was uncommon is Matt Williams had been retired for 5 years when he was out there taking those ground balls. I got a chance to ask him after, when we were walking back to the locker room, I said, "What are you doing out there? You making a comeback here or something? You're 43 years old. You've been retired for a long time." And he said, "Oh, I just missed it. I love to practice. And I'd do that every single day if I could." They love to practice. Now, real quick, coaches. Remember I said rec players like to play. Elite athletes, they like to practice. They like to develop. Come prepared. Come with a plan. Get your practices organized. I help your kids understand the value of practice by showing them that you care enough about it to be organized. Another characteristic that I see in these athletes is they are fiercely competitive. And they believe every time they step on the field that they're going to win. They don't care who it is. They don't care what their record is against another team. They are fiercely competitive. So kids, I want you to think about something. What goes in your head when you show up to a game and you're playing a team that you know is better than you? They've beaten you before. You have a feeling that they're better than you. Are you afraid of them? Are you nervous because you don't want to be embarrassed? Or are you saying to yourself, you know what, here's the day and we're going to beat this team that's better than us. Or we're going to get back and we're going to get some revenge. These characteristics go beyond sports too. Unfortunately, I had neither the first characteristic of an elite athlete. I had some of the second characteristic, so I wasn't very skilled. I forgot what the first one was. I did work pretty hard, but I was fiercely competitive. And people ask me all the time, you know, we see kids developing bad habits, they cheat to win. You know, sports used to develop character. And I say, well, it still is. Unfortunately, sometimes it goes wrong, but it still does. I didn't become an elite athlete, but some of those characteristics have certainly helped me in my profession. I'll tell you a quick story to demonstrate that. When I was finishing graduate school at Arizona State, I got a phone call from the Phoenix Suns. And they said, "We're looking for somebody to come and help us in the design of our training programs. And we're going to interview 5 consultants for this position. And we'd like you to come and be one of them." And they said, "We want you to know that you're by far the youngest. You really have no experience. The other guys are all very well known. They've been in the NBA for 15, 20 years. But we want to just see what perhaps some new blood, some new ideas might be. So come on over for an interview." So I show up 2 weeks later for my interview with the general manager. The head coach came in, they start drilling me on all these questions. I said, "All right, I'm kind of excited about this. I'm the underdog. I'm the one that's got to step up here." Convinced him that there was something to it. He said, the coach, Mike D'Antoni, says, All right, the rest of your interview is going to happen tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, Steve Nash gets here at 8:30. He's the most highly trained athlete I've worked with. He was already at that time. He says, Steve takes his fitness very, very serious. Your job is to convince him that you have something better for him to do tomorrow than what he's already planned on doing. He says, and he doesn't know that you're coming. Then he says at 9:30 or 10, depending on what he did last night, Shaq shows up. Your job is to put Shaq through a fitness test and then convince him to get his butt in shape. That was the rest of my interview. I did not sleep that night. But I didn't, not because I was afraid, I couldn't wait. The chances of, I knew those guys, and I knew guys like that. I thought that the chances of me succeeding were very, very slim. But I loved it. I loved the challenge. So I show up the next morning. It took me about 5 minutes. Steve was working his tail off, following a Race RX cardio program, and has ever since. That was the easy part. Shaq comes in, bad mood, which was only the only time I ever saw him in a bad mood, by the way. Did not want to do a fitness test, was not pleased. He had no idea who I was. I convinced him to get on the treadmill, and we started the fitness test. I start hitting the speed button to make it go faster and faster. He starts hitting the slow down button to make it go slower and slower. And I said, Shaq, the point of this is that you actually have to exercise. You have to work. And we got to see how hard you can work. So I increased the speed, and sure enough, he decreased the speed. And I slammed the stop button on the treadmill as hard as I could. And I said, Shaq, if you're not going to do this, you're wasting my time, and I have better things to do. And the entire training facility was completely silent. I figured I was either dead or I had gotten the job. Sure enough, he starts hitting the speed button, speeds up, and from that day forward, worked harder than any athlete I've ever worked with. But it took some confidence going into a situation that I thought was probably hopeless. You've got to have that confidence. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care how good the girl is or the boy is that's competing with you for that roster spot. Doesn't matter. Do not be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of competition. I've learned to love it. Early on, I didn't particularly love it, but now it adds a little spice to life. It's fun. Did you know that there are 100 good high school players for every one college roster spot? Kids, does that make you afraid? Does that make you want to give up? Decide that it's too hard? Or are you going to say, all right, I'm young enough, I can develop my talents. I can develop my fitness. I can be that one person and do things now that causes the other 99 to fall behind you. Look at it as a challenge. Now on that note, we have agreed, both as a club and as our company Race RX, that we have some things that I believe we can do together. They're going to take advantage of some opportunities that you young players have here in Cache Valley. For those of you who haven't been coming, there have been a group of kids that have been training with us for the last 3 months. I've enjoyed working with them. My staff loves them. We enjoy having them come to the facility. We love to see kids with aspirations of doing great things. And I'm confident that we have some things that can help them to succeed in that. But what I don't want you to do is go into this with, well, we're going to train for a couple of months and then we're going to kill everybody. That might start happening. If it does, then you're probably already good enough to do that anyway. What I think we have for you is a process of age-appropriate training. Stuff that we've developed over the last 15 years in research. And what happens if we take kids at certain ages and we do certain things, their bodies develop differently than kids who do not do those things. They develop coordination that other kids don't. Their bodies become more athletic. Their muscles are trained to do things that normally if they didn't follow those steps, don't do. We've seen it in research. And the cool thing is there's so many young athletes in here, even those of you who are 13 or 14, you're still young. We can do some great things. Right? But I tell our athletes all the time, I am a confident man in my programming. And I can develop probably the greatest training program on the planet. I'm that confident. Some of you know me, know that. But I can't do the work for you. And the most impressive thing that I've seen in your kids, they come to work. We know when they need to push as hard as they can, and we know when they need to back off. And those of you who have been coming, you've seen that. But what I like about you is you don't come with any kind of regulator on you. Your athletes are coming ready to work every workout, and I like that. And I'm confident if we pair that energy with good training programs, some great things are going to happen over the next 5 or 6 years. I thank the club for being willing to listen and take a look at our programming. I thank those of you who have been coming and look forward to getting to know more and more of the kids from this club. And over the next 3 or 4 years, I guarantee if we both do our parts, there will become a distinct advantage for these kids. Good? Did I take more than I was supposed to? Perfect. Kids, I'll see you May 25th for testing.
Just want to thank Matt. Along those lines, my experience with RaceRx is at arm's length. One of the things that Matt said when I first showed up was, you can come to this line, but you can't cross it if you're an adult. And I wish I had a gym on the soccer field with that same line. Because the few times that I've actually gone to Matt's facility, the players are working and focused and having fun, and there's no one screaming, yelling, or telling them what to do. Even the trainers are composed and compassionate and really trying hard to work on their technical aspects. My one brief history with RaceRx is the U11 girls had been training with Matt for pretty much the entire winter, and we went down to St. George. And within about 30 minutes, one of the girls looked up at me that just come off the field and was sitting on the bench next to me and just said, "RaceRx is working. We're killing those girls." And that was enough for me. And I applaud what Matt is doing, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to